Um, the presentation will very much be kind of a live demo, so hopefully everything will work just fine, but as with anything, a live demo always has a few risks. But what I want to show you is truly how I would go about cleaning up the data and how I used to do it back in my days at Polis and would do a lot of the cleanup for the data harvest program. So the tools that I'm going to be demonstrating today are a subset of the tools I had developed back then. And I'm again hoping that this will be helpful for you and will make the transition from maybe whatever format you have now for your addresses to the data harvest format a little bit easier for everybody. The first thing I want to mention, though, is before you use these tools, please make a backup of your data. I am not responsible if the tools mess up your data. So make sure you make a copy, make a backup, so that if anything goes wrong, you can go back to how it was before. Kind of a good tip in general, but especially here, I would hate to have a frantic call like, oh my God, this was all destroyed. I don't want to be responsible for that. So hopefully none of that will happen, but just to be on the safe side, please make sure to make a backup. For the presentation, I'm going to turn off my video because I'm just going to be looking at another screen, and also to improve the throughput of the data, the sharing of the screen and my voice as well. If you have any questions, please unmute yourself and say it out loud, interrupt me. I am okay with that. And you can also put stuff in the chat. And Matt, feel free to interrupt me if it's something that you think would be best for me to answer right then and there. So let's get started. Today, I will be talking or showing you how to get to Toolbox. And then I have the tools separated in kind of three groupings. The first one is to separate your address into multiple fields. And then the second portion is to validate your domain values. And the third portion is to clean up your strings. And then finally, I'll show off a few useful queries that you might take advantage of as you're doing this work. I've been a programmer. I was a programmer for many years, so I'm really comfortable with Python, with SQL, but I know that not everybody is. So I wanted to show some of that today. And also Google truly is your friend. A lot of times I don't remember how to do something, so I just Google it and then I get the answer right there. ChatGPT can be helpful, but don't believe everything it tells you because sometimes it'll just make stuff up. But it's at least worth a try. All right, so where to get to Toolbox? This is kind of a busy slide now that I look at it this way. But so I want to show you, if you go to the Data Harvest hub site, which is just dataharvest.gio.in.gov, we have a bunch of information in here. But if you go to the Resources tab and click on Overview, we have some resources for you. And one of these is this ArcGIS Pro Toolbox. And if you click on this, it will download a zip file that contains the toolbox, basically. This is a Python toolbox. The code is right there. So if you're a coder, feel free to modify and improve it. If you do think of an improvement, I'd love it if you could share with me so we can share it with everybody else. Once you've downloaded the zip file and extracted it, you'll want to load I don't know what that was. You will want to load the toolbox in ArcGIS Pro. And the way you do that is if you right-click on toolboxes in your catalog pane and click Add Toolbox, you'll be able to then point to that toolbox, and it should be a PYT file. And that will load the toolbox in your ArcGIS Pro environment. We only have this toolbox for Pro. I know at the state, we no longer have ArcMap, but if there's a real desire from a lot of people to get an ArcMap version of this, please let me know. And I will see if that's something that I can do and maybe get ArcMap back on my computer so that I can convert this to an ArcMap toolbox. So as I mentioned earlier, the tools are sort of separated into three categories. These are all the tools that we have in there. And the ones at the top here that start with 1 are the ones that will help you basically split up an address into multiple fields. And we're really just looking at 4 of the fields here. That is your prefix direction, your street name, your street type, and then your suffix direction. I'm not really too worried in here about, splitting out your county road or your US highway as a pre-type, or whether your old word at the beginning of your street name, whether that should be a pre-modifier or whether that's part of the street. Those are kind of things that you're going to have to query and look for and kind of do on your own. So this is really focused on trying to split up your address into those 4 components. And then I've got 4 tools here that allow you to validate your domains. The first 3 are kind of for very specific fields, but then the last one will work on anything that you have that has a domain-based attribute, and should hopefully help you identify and fix any incorrect values pretty quickly. And then the last one, the last 3 are things like if you have extra spaces. I saw a lot of that, maybe a trailing space or a space at the beginning, or maybe 2, 3 spaces between words. That will get rid of all of those. We also have one to replace any blanks with nulls. That does not work on shapefiles, just FYI. And then something to uppercase text attributes as well. All right, so let's start with the actual live demo. So here I have a data set. It's a subset, not a whole lot of features here, about 8,000 features. And all I have is the address in a single field. And what I really want to do is I want to separate this into multiple fields. And I do have a cheat sheet as I'm working through this. So please bear with me as I kind of refer back to that and copy paste some queries. So I don't try to make up some Python code here on the fly. But the first tool here will create some interim street fields. And those are basically 4 fields that it will add to your table that start with an X underscore. And then I've got a couple tools to try to extract the prefix direction, your north, south, east, west, or your suffix direction from your street name. And I have one that will remove the suffix direction from your street name, and I'll demo all of these here. And then I also have something that will attempt to extract a street type from a name. And then I tend to skip this 1F, and just go to 1G, which will clean up the street name, which means it takes out the prefix direction, the suffix direction, the street type if it was already there. So it's just the street name, and then copies the data over to the correct fields and then deletes these X underscore fields that were added in the first step. So it just kind of cleans everything up and puts the information where it needs to be. So let's start with the create interim street fields tool. If I grab that, you can then pick a layer. So I will pick my one and only layer here in my map, and you can choose what you want to do. There is documentation for this tool. It should be part of the zip file. This is what it looks like. It's a lot of pages, but don't let that scare you. There's a lot of screenshots in here and a lot of pages for the table of contents. But it will go through and detail the information for every single tool, and it has some tips on these kind of checkboxes and when you want to use which one. In my case, I don't have any field that already has a prefix direction. I remember when I was doing the data harvest, I often would get something with the street number in one field, the prefix direction in another field, and then the rest of the street name in a single field. So in that case, I would want to copy over, my prefix direction and then my street name. But sometimes I would also have the suffix direction. So if I had that, that was something that was helpful as well. So it would just kind of do all of this for me. In my case, the only thing I want to do is I want to copy the street name field. So my new string, I want it to go into the X underscore name field that this is going to create. So I've checked this. I'm going to run it. And this will probably make a lot more sense once you see the results of this tool. And for a lot of the tools, I do have little messages that pop up. So you can open up the View Details window, and it will show you kind of the progress of that tool. All right, so now you can see it's added these 4 new fields that start with an X underscore, and it's copied the value in my new str field and put it in my X underscore st name field. So that's what that first tool has done. So the problem with my address here, with my st name, is that I have a street number. And the first thing I want to do is I want to get rid of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new field that creates a street number. So let me open up, and I forgot to do that before this. Let me open up my Python window. And you can do this manually, but I just wrote a little bit of code to do this for me, so it's a little bit quicker. But now I've added a new field here to store my house number. So this is not something that my tools will do, but it's something that I need to do with this specific data set. I'm going to make sure that I have nothing selected. And now I'm going to do a calculate field on the house number field. And what I'm going to do there, actually, before I do that, I want to show you something else. So I'm going to, nope, wait, that was what I was supposed to do. I jumped ahead in my instructions. So I'm going to grab this field right here, and I'm going to use this Python command called split. And I'm telling it, okay, split my word whenever there's a space. So now I'm going to have a list of values. So for this right here, I'll have the first value is 4677, the second value will be N, the third will be 800, and the last one will be W. And I'm going to grab the first value because that most likely is the street number, and indexes are 0 based. So it's really value 0 in here. So I'm going to do that. And now I have my house number that is in here, which is very nice. But just to be sure, I want to sort my values here and make sure that these all look like house numbers. And what I can see is that I have some that did not have a house number at the beginning. So I want to find all of those and select them and clear that out. So I should have 67. Yep. And I'm going to set those values to null. Which, if you set it to null, you actually want to type in none. Don't type in null as a string because that is not the same. I know I've seen that once in a while in the past. So now these values that did not have a valid house number, now have a null for the house number. The next thing I want to do is I want to remove the first word, so my street name, from my street name here. So sorry, I want to remove the house number from my street names. So I'm going to switch my selection here. And what I have is all of those rows, records that had a valid house number. I'm grabbing those. And I am going to get everything but the first word. So to do that, here's another cool little query that you can do with Python. But I'm grabbing the street name, and I'm using this function called partition, which basically will put, it takes the first word and then the rest of the word and splits it up. And this right here will keep only everything after the first word. So if I run that, you can now see that my Cedar Ridge Road right here, 95 Cedar Ridge, my house number is in this field, but my street name only has Cedar Ridge. So now when in my street name field, I'm just dealing with street names. I don't have any house numbers. So that step is done. I'm going to clear my selection here. So now that I've done that and I've moved my house number somewhere else, the first step that I want to do is I want to extract the prefix direction. So that's, your cardinal direction, north, south, east, west, but it also looks for northwest, northeast, southwest, and southeast. So I'm going to run this tool right here, and I'm going to grab my layer, and you'll notice that it automatically filled out those fields. So if you're using this tool in order and you have those X underscore field names, if it finds those, it will automatically pick those. But if you don't happen to be doing it in that sequence and you have, your fields are named something different, you can just go and pick what those fields are. So I'm pointing to my street name, and I'm also telling it, okay, here's my prefix field. So I'm going to run this tool. And what it's looking for a street that starts with north, south, east, or west, or an abbreviation, an N or a W, or an N and a period. And it looks for those. And what it does is it moves those into the prefix direction. Now, it's not a super smart tool. So if you have something that's, for example, called North Street, it probably will move north into your prefix direction, and then you'll still have North Street in your street name. But eventually, if you just go through all these steps without paying attention, you'll end up with a blank street name. So you don't want to do that. So you know your data best. Go through, look at the values that you have in your prefix direction. And if something should not have been taken out of your street name, maybe that direction is actually part of the street. Like if it's West Point Drive and it's named after, the military college, then that probably shouldn't be a prefix direction. It should stay as part of the name. So those are some things that you want to, ensure and fix. If that's the case, just set that value to null or blank for now, and that will solve the problem. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to extract the suffix direction. So it's doing the same thing as the previous tool, except it's looking for that north, south, east, west at the end of my street name. So I'm going to run that tool, grab my layer. It pre-populates the fields here. I'm going to run it. And now it should populate my post direction with all of those values. So let's sort this so that we can see it. And you can see now that it's pulled out these post directions into that field. So this county road right here, north 300 west, it's got north in the prefix direction and west in the suffix direction, which is kind of what we want. The next thing that I would want to do is I would want to extract the street type. But one thing you'll notice is if I have a suffix direction at the end of my street name, that value is still there, right? So in here, my west is still there. So the first thing I want to do is I want to remove my suffix direction from my street name. So I'm going to do that. And again, it selects everything. Make sure that nothing is selected. There we go. And run that tool. So now we'll see for those county roads here at the bottom, the west has been pulled out of my street name. So that's a little bit cleaner. So now I want to extract the street type. And it really is looking, does this have at least 2 words in my street name? And it's going to move the last word in my street name into the street type. There are hundreds of possible valid street types, and I have not programmed in to look for a highway and a street and a parkway, plus you've got a zillion different abbreviations. So you're going to have to check those values yourself, but I have some tools to help you do that. So I'm going to run this tool right here. And now you can see that I have, for these roads right here, West Bachelor Road or West Orland Road, it has moved or it has copied the street type from the street name into the street type. So that's pretty nice because now a lot of that work is done. But the next step is sort of verifying that the information in there is valid. So let me look at my notes, what I'm supposed to do. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a simple select by attributes. So I'm going to grab my street type. And I'm going to look at the unique values. And from that, I'm going to be able to already pretty quickly see some values that probably should not be in the street type. So I'm going to deal with those. So I'm going to do I'm going to select all of the features where a street type is not really a street type. So things like my A, my B, my D, my G. I didn't see a C, so I'll keep that one. My H. James is probably not a valid street type. Neither is this one, which I'm not going to try to pronounce. These other ones look like they might be valid. I'm going to take out Gauge. I don't think that that's a valid one. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to select all of those values. And I have almost 1,200 records here that have a street type that is probably not really a street type. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set all of those values to null. So now those are fine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to rerun that select by attributes to kind of make sure that nothing was missed. Sometimes I miss one. Oops, not that one, this one. I'm going to look at these values. So I've got Avenue. Oh, I missed Brooke and Charles. So I'm going to handle those. Brooke, oops, not contain the text. Includes the values. That's better. Brooke, Charles. I think everything else looks legit. So I'm going to run that query and I'm going to set those to null as well. All right. So now we have a pretty good start on separating my addresses into, those four main fields: your prefix direction, your suffix direction, your street name, and your street type. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run this tool right here, 1G. As I mentioned earlier, if I make this a little bit bigger, you'll be able to see the full title of that tool. But it will basically remove the prefix direction and the type of the street from the street name. And then it's going to copy everything over to my target field. But I actually don't have my target fields in here. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to add all of those fields to my data. And open my handy dandy Python. And I see an extra comma here that I probably don't need. So let's run that. Hopefully that works. Okay, it is. So right now, just a little bit of code again, so you don't have to see me adding about a dozen fields manually. But what it's done is it's added, it's added all of these Nina fields for the address. So I have my address number prefix, my address number, my suffix for the address number, and then I have my prefix modifier, my prefix direction, my prefix type, my prefix separator, my name, my post type, post direction, and post modifier. So all of those fields are there. So now that they're there, notice that my tool automatically saw and recognized those fields. So if you're following the standard from Nina, it will find those. If you are not, because you're working with, you need a different field name on your end, that's okay. You can just pick that field from the list. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run that tool. And I'm going to look at the messages that it puts out as well. No messages. Okay. All right. So you'll notice all of my X underscore fields, except for that house number, have been removed. And now I have values in my prefix direction, my street name, my post type, and my post direction. And my street name is nice and clean without the, the prefix direction and without the street type either. All right, and I'm going to look for, I don't believe I have any, but I'm going to look for those types of streets that I mentioned earlier where I may have a cardinal direction as the street name, and I have potentially that same value in the prefix direction. So I'm going to run that query right here, and I don't have anything. So that's good. I don't have any of those cases of like a North Street or a West Street or something like that. So that is basically those first few tools. I don't know how far G goes. I guess 7 tools that allow you to separate your street name into those 4 fields. So I think that's pretty quick. Even if you have a few 100,000 records, that usually goes pretty quickly. It depends a little bit on how consistent your streets are called and how how clean your data might be. But I was usually able to do that fairly quickly, just in a few minutes for most counties. So the next thing I want to do is, as you may know, the NINA standard has domains for the prefix direction, for the prefix type, for the street name, sorry, not for the street name, for the post type, for the post direction. The fields that I've created here don't have domains set already, so they're just dummy fields. There's nothing in here that sets up a domain, and if we look at the fields, you will see that there's no domains that are defined here yet. And oftentimes what I would do is I would create these really large fields to move all the data into. And that helped for any kind of weird addresses. And then eventually I would move it into the shorter fields that are the NINA standard. All right, so I'm going to, again, make sure my selection is cleared. And what I want to do now is I want to clean up my values here. I want to make sure that all of my prefix directions are valid based on the domain, and same thing for my post type and my post direction. So I've got a couple of options here. If I want to do the street direction, I can use this one. And what this does, when you download the zip file from the Data Harvest Hub site, it comes with, a Python file that has all the code behind this toolbox, but it also comes with a geodatabase that has a few tables in it. And those tables are reflect the valid values for your prefix direction, for your type, and so forth. And it just automatically knows to use one of those tables. So it's a little bit more hard-coded than Tool 2D, which I will demo later. So if I want to do this, you notice it automatically knew I was looking for the prefix for the street direction, sorry. It looked for the ST pre-dir field, which it found. But you could run this on another field. So if I wanted to run it on the post direction, I could just select that field if I wanted to. And now it's showing me, hey, these are not valid. So I need to fix all of those. And I've got a quick way to fix it because on the right-hand side, it's showing you what the valid values are for that field. So this is pretty easy. I can just go say, okay, well, E should be east, N should be north, W should be west. And once that's done, I can run my tool. And what this will do is it will basically query for anything that has E as a value for the prefix direction and replace it with east, and then do the same thing for N and W. And if you have a lot of data or you have a lot of fixes, the nice thing is it will tell you what it's working on every time. So now all of my prefix directions should be good to go. So if I clear out my query, and I found the quickest way to see if my values look good is to just go in the select by attributes and then kind of seeing what values it shows me. And that all looks good. These all look like legitimate values. So that's nice. So what I'm going to do now is demo to you tool 2D, which allows you to be a little bit more flexible. So I'm going to grab this, and what you see here is it offers you a little bit more information. So still I have to select the layer, but now I get to select the field that I want to check. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the post direction. And it now allows me to pick a domain table. So it won't allow you to find an actual domain in a geodatabase. I have not programmed it that way, but there is a domain to table tool that you can run. Oh, it was right there. And that will allow you to convert a domain to a table. And then once you've done that, you can then point to that table. So I am going to grab the location of that. And I have my table already created, which is my street name directional. So I'm specifying, okay, these are all the valid values for that. And if I go and show you what that table looks like, it's a pretty short one, but it just has my code and my description, and it has the valid values for that domain. And it wants the field in your table that has those valid values. So I'm going to grab code as the field. And now it runs through it. It looks at all the values that are in that field, my post direction, compares them to the valid values in my street name directional table, and lists all the ones that it cannot find as a valid value. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before, match them up and run my tool. And now all of that's been fixed. So pretty nice. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fix my street types. So this is usually the one that's a little bit more complicated because you might just not be consistent or have a lot of values that are just not good. So I used my tool 2B, which is sort of pre-coded to deal with the street types. But again, you could just use tool 2D, which allows you to do what we just did for the post direction. And now it's showing me these are all of my values that I have, and none of these are in my domain, and I need to fix them. So you can see court here was spelled a couple different ways, once in all caps and one not in all caps. And I'm going to fix all of those. So I want to show you a few things here. One is if there's one of these values that you're not ready to deal with right now because you're not sure, like, is this a suite? Is this a street? I'm not sure. You can remove that value and it will not deal with it. So I'm going to remove STE because I'm not sure what that's for. But the rest of them, this is a long list, right? Very, very long. One of the things you can do is you can start typing. And it will find the value that is valid for that. So I'm going to go and fix all of these. And if you do that enough, you start being really familiar with abbreviations and which values are valid and which ones are not. This TR is always a little tough, but I'm going to pretend it's trace and not trail. And then crossing. There we go. So now I've associated the correct value to all of my invalid ones, and I'm going to run the tool. And again, the details will show you all of the fixes that it's doing. And now in 4.86 seconds, I have fixed all of my values in my feature class. So now they're all spelled out and correct. But if you recall, there was one I wasn't sure what it should be, that STE one. So I'm going to look for that one. Oh, and looks like one of them was missed, and that might be just because of the spelling. So maybe something for me to check in my code here why that is. But this one, the original value is actually North Wayne Street, Suite E. So this is really unit information and not street information. So this one, I need to go and fix a few different values because my east was put into my post direction, which is really not right. That's just the suite number or suite identifier. So what really this should be is street. And these should be blank. I'm going to set them to none. And finally, I need to take out this and just make this Wayne. And I'm going to save my edits. So you always want to go and double check your data, make sure that the simplified logic in these tools then inadvertently change or just made a wrong assumption on what something is. So now that one is cleaned up. And I'm going to go and double check this again, and I'm going to deal with my court here and fix that one as well, because that one should be court. So there we go. One of the things I like to do is after I've made a bunch of changes to my data, I just like to run these tools again, just to make sure I didn't mess something up later on. So I'm going to look at my street types here and again, make sure nothing came up, which means that everything looks good. There's nothing that I need to change. I'm going to do the same thing on the direction. Nothing for prefix came up, so that's good. Let me try the post direction. Once this is done thinking, nothing came up in here, so I'm good to go. All right, before I move on to the rest, does anybody have questions at this time, or does anything just not really make sense? All right, hopefully that means everything's really clear. If not, we are recording this and we will post it on our hub site, and I'll make sure that you have my contact information as well. All right, so we've done splitting up all the addresses into multiple fields. We've cleaned up the domain values. There's one in here for one way. That would be for your street center lines. That was another one that I often had to fix because I would get values that were not part of the domain, and so I would want to map them to the right values. But you can use this tool 2D on any data that you have where you have a set of values that are really okay to use. Because even if you have a domain set up in your feature class, you can still have an invalid value, even if it's a domain-based field. So just be aware of that. You won't be able to query them. So if you do your select by attribute and you're trying to find it, it's not going to come up. So the best way I have found either is using this tool that I wrote or to do a summarize and summarize all those values and look at that list of values to see if anything shows up in here that really should not be a valid value. All right, so the next few tools here, I'm really just going to show, well, actually, I'll show you all of them. But this one, I want to warn you that some of these may take a while to run, especially depending on the number of fields that you're going to run these on. So if I do my strip extra spaces, what I want to do is I want to show you an example. And I'm going to do it on this field right here. I'm going to add a few extra spaces so you can see what it does. Probably should have done these at the top. Okay, so rows 1057 and on. I'm going to save my changes here. So we've got some invalid values, right? That just looks dirty. We don't want to have that. So I'm going to pick my layer, and then you can add the fields that you want to run this on one by one. But if you have a lot of them, you can also click on this little drop down and you can select all of them if you want to, or you can select just the ones that you want to run this on, for example. So I'm going to run it on those 3 just for fun. And I'm going to run the tool. And now it's telling you which fields it's processing. And when it's done running, okay. That is because I have some null values, and looks like I need to add a little bit of code error checking. But what you'll notice is with 1057, right, is where I think these 3 or 4 I had made some changes to and added extra spaces, and now all those spaces are gone. So that's just kind of nice, a quick way to clean up the values and take out those extra spaces. Then I have another one here to replace a field with a blank. So let me make one of these bad, and I'm going to go at the top of my table so it's a little easier. I'm going to do this one like that. So they just have a little space, just nothing much. But it's not a null value, but it should be a null value. So I'm going to run this tool. I'm going to clear my selection as well. And I'm going to pick my layer, pick my field. That would be, we'll do add num prefix and address number. And I'm going to run that. And that didn't work. Uh-oh. So might be because I actually had a space in there and I shouldn't. But now it replaces them with null. Okay, something for me to check why this isn't working right. But generally it should work. I'm not sure why it's doing that. Let me see if I can, might just be, let me set it to just an empty string. Okay, clear. And I'm going to run this tool again. I think it was just the interface here. There we go. Now that value used to be just an empty string, no space. I had spaces in there before. That's why I wouldn't find it. Just an empty string, and now it's replaced it with a null. It just makes for a lot cleaner data if you have those null values. And then finally, there's one to uppercase text attributes. What it will do is it will only provide you, all of my fields here are strings, but if you had some that were dates or numbers or anything like that, they would not show up in here. But it would allow you to uppercase all those values. I would just give you a little bit of a warning. In the past, I've always uppercased everything, But the domains from Nina for like the prefix direction, as you might have noticed, they are not all uppercased. So you want to be careful if you're going to be uppercasing all of your attributes. It might not be something that you want to do on your data. But if you do have them all uppercased, it is also a quick, easy way to take care of any discrepancies in terms of casing. Sometimes I would find some of those, but you would be able to run that as well. So if I were to change this address here and write it as bachelor lowercase, save my edits. And if I run that on my new string, what it will do now is it will uppercase that value. And there we go. So those are basically all the tools in the toolbox. The next thing I want to show all of you is some queries, like I mentioned earlier, that I think make things pretty easy. And I've tried to make them relevant to what you might want to do for the data harvest and cleaning up your address points and your street cell lines. So let me see. The first thing I want to do is I want to find non-numeric addresses. So I'm going to add a couple of fields to my table. Again, handy dandy Python. Okay. So I have added these two fields. Is address numeric and is the name numeric? And what I want to do is I'm going to see if I have a street name that is numeric. And that might be really helpful if you have some county road or your highways or your interstates so that you can set up the right prefix type for those roads. So I'm going to populate this. And the way I do that is I have a little function that I can write in here. So my expression is in Python, and I can call this function, and I can pass it my street name. So what this is going to do, it's calling my function as numeric. It's passing in the street name. And then what it's trying to do is it's trying to convert my name to a float, which is a number. And if that succeeded and then throw an error, it's going to populate my field here with is number. And if it throws an error, that means it's not a number, and it's going to populate my field with not a number. So I'm going to run this. And now you can see that I have all of this populated. So I'm going to freeze my field. There we go. And if we go to the street name, you can see that the one here that says these three values are 800 and they are marked as a number, but Bachelor and Orland are marked as not a number. So what I'm going to do is a county road typically is a numeric street name, right? An 800 or something like that. But it also will have a no pre-type, or I'm looking for those that don't have a pre-type yet, but do have let me think about this. What did I do here? Okay, no post type, so no street or anything like that in here, but it does have a prefix direction, it's not null, and a suffix direction, which is not null. So if I run this query here, what I get back is out of my 8,300 or so records, I have about 2,600 that are most likely a county road because they look like, you know, North 800 West or West 350 North. So the nice thing with those, and I can then go into my pre-type and I can populate the value here and say that is a county road. And that's really nice. If you have the pre-type populated, I recommend especially your US highways, your interstates, your county roads, your state roads, trying to identify all of those and classifying them correctly. It's really nice to then be able to, especially on a street cell line, to be able to display those differently on your map. It also makes the geocoder a little bit more accurate as well. So I'm going to run another query here. And I'm going to be looking for any streets that have these abbreviations in them. So something that has SR or State Road or State RD or ST space RD. Looks like I have some duplication here, but I'm going to run this query. And I have 413 roads that came up. And I'm going to sort these so I can see what they are. But this is nice, clean data because they all are consistently showing, have that same abbreviation, but these all say State Road. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to populate my pre-direction with State Road. And then I'm going to remove it from my name. And there's a number of ways that you can do that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do just a replace. So I'm going to grab my street name again. It's Python to the rescue. So if you don't know how to do it, just do find and replace Python, and it will tell you how to do it. So hopefully my memory is working. So I'm going to do State Road, and I'm going to add that space afterwards. And I'm just going to make that a blank. So it's going to replace anything that has this in it with nothing. So running this, and now I just have my State Road number and my name, and I have my pre-type correctly classified. So if I wanted to, I can now display this information based on the pre-type. And you can see, well, this isn't the greatest selection of colors. Maybe this is a little bit better. So my brown values don't have a street type. My green ones are county roads, and then these bluish ones are state roads. So it's kind of a nice, quick way to symbolize that data and potentially see some issues. All right. I think that's everything I wanted to show. I will also make this PowerPoint available that has a lot of the code that I just shared, how to remove the first word, identifying basically identifying whether a street's name is numeric or any field is numeric. You could also do this on the address because an address in Nina, that add number field is a numeric field. So anything that is in there, maybe a dash or a half or anything like that, that is not numeric. So you need to move that into either the address number prefix or the address number suffix. So that's also a quick way to identify those address numbers that are not valid. And I've got some things in here, like I showed you, to find county roads and state roads. This one would allow you to find any streets that start with the word old, and then you would have to figure out whether that should be a pre-modifier value versus being part of the street name. And I also have some code here to find US highways or interstates, and I already showed the potential county roads. And this one is finding potential street names, street types. Okay, so this is a good one to see, was there a street type in my street name that maybe should have been in the street type that maybe I might have missed somewhere along the way. I don't know if I have an example in this one, but let's run that query anyway. So again, it's looking for a street name that is not null. The pre-type is null. The post type is null. So no pre-type, no post type, does have a street name value. The address is not numeric, and my street name does have a space in it, because if I have a street type in my street name, there probably should be more than one word. So I'm gonna go and run that, and it looks like I have 1,200 records that do have that. So we've got a few examples here. Yeah, this is a good one. So that didn't get caught in anything that I had done. But this is a similar example to the one earlier with that suite. The street was part of the suite was part of the street name. So that is something that I would probably need to fix manually. These ones always kind of stumped me. I didn't really know how to handle those. But we've got lane and we've got lake in here. So maybe there's something there that could be fixed. We've got a lot of those. But that's just another way to kind of look through your data and make sure that it looks good. This rolling brook, maybe brook should be a street type. I'm not sure. And then another example where the unit information was part of that full address and should be moved out, and then that street should be split up into its street name and street type. So that was all I wanted to show today. It looks like we're on time. Any questions or comments? Anything that's maybe unclear or whichever. We're open to anything. And I guess I'd like to know, do you think this is something that's going to be helpful for you? Just so we know whether or not to maintain this moving forward if we find some issues.
Hey, Marianne, this is Chuck. I think this is going to be incredibly useful. My data's for the most part pretty much there, but these are great tools.
Awesome. Thank you. I was hoping at least 1 or 2 people would find it helpful, so this wasn't for nothing. But yeah, I really cannot believe Esri doesn't have a tool to like identify values in a field that has a domain and are not part of the domain. Like, just it's incredible to me that that's not there. But yeah, so I've used that for a number of things, not just the data harvest. But yeah, so thank you, Chuck. Appreciate that. And Leanne, Cindy, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, we're just trying to make your life easier. And truly, if there's another thing that you're really struggling with on how to split up your data, how to clean it up, reach out to us. We are here for you. We want better data. We understand that this is a lot of work. So if you're struggling with something, chances are somebody else is struggling with the same thing. So let us know. Maybe there's something that we can develop, or maybe we can provide you some tips. We all have experience with different portions of GIS. I'm not an expert. I don't really know what I'm doing with imagery and raster data sets, but I know what I'm doing with Python. So if there's a way that we can help there, please just hit us up. And I will put my contact information here in the chat, and I will put Matt's as well, so that you guys know how to reach out to us. And truly, don't hesitate to. That's what we're here for. We're trying to make your lives easier. So, all right. If there are no other questions or comments, thank you very much for attending. We'll be recording this, and hopefully in the next few days, we'll have it up on our hub site. And I hope to see many of you in, where are we going? Michigan City for the IJIC conference here in a couple of weeks. So thank you. Have a good one.